I think we're just checking out. Hello. Sorry, I'm just looking to make sure I can get a sense of the numbers. So hold on. Whenever you're ready, Ryan, we can get started, and Ramson is going to introduce himself, and then we're going to be moving into a question and answer period after that. So I think that's how we're going to kind of move forward with this. And thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Sarah Driscoll, and I teach here at Andover in 11th and 12th grade English. For those of you, I see many of my students here, but there's also some other individuals, so welcome. I'm really excited to welcome Ramson Lomatewama from the Hopi community to speak with us tonight about himself, his story, and his artwork. So Ryan, do you want to go ahead and share your...
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Ryan Wheeler. I'm the director of the Robert S. Peabody Institute of Archaeology at Phillips Academy. And this talk is being sponsored by the Peabody as well as the Office of Community and Multicultural Development, CAMD, on campus, that those of you who are students or alums or parents may be familiar with. I am going to start by sharing my screen and land acknowledgement. All right, can you see my screen? I'm never sure. Emma's nodding. Good, thank you. Let's see. All right. And move these. Okay. We are on native land. We acknowledge Phillips Academy's presence on the traditional land of the Pennacook and Pawtucket peoples and the lands of the modern-day Abenaki, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Wabanaki, Pokanoket, and Nipmuc nations. We honor all indigenous peoples who are here now, have been here for time immemorial, and will be here in the future. We recognize indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of this land, the enduring impact of indigenous genocide, and the continued oppression of Native peoples, voices, cultures, and spiritualities. By enacting this acknowledgement, we affirm our institutional commitments to honoring the land we occupy, centering Native voices, uplifting indigenous communities, and dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism at Phillips Academy and beyond. All right. So I am going to turn it over to Ramson at this point, and he will introduce himself and also talk a little bit about his life, his art, poetry, teaching. And thank you for being here, Ramson.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. The last gatherings that we had was really enriching for me in terms of just rethinking where I've been, where I'm at now, and where I'm going from this point on. I'd like to welcome all of you to this Zoom session. I really didn't plan this out to go in any particular direction because I'd rather talk with people than to talk to them. I will tell you that I'm turning 68 years young in a couple of weeks, and I feel like I'm just ready to tackle the world for another, 100 years. I've been working on some projects here at home. I just finished a stained glass commission that's heading up your way. You may be able to see it at some point fairly shortly. I've been just looking back on where I've been in terms of the artwork. Most of you know that I'm a retired teacher. My career spans every grade between kindergarten and the college level. I used to teach sociology. led a double life or a triple life as an artist, an educator, and a family man for a good number of years. I've retired from teaching, and I'm just focusing on family and on my artwork at this point in my life. I've been around the block in terms of just exploring and returning and exploring some more, which I really just enjoy doing because it's been a really enriching adventure for me personally, spiritually, professionally, in a lot of different ways. I've been blowing glass specifically now for about 21 years. Prior to that, I taught sociology at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. And prior to that, I was creating stained glass art for a number of people. And I did that maybe for about 15 or 20 years. Prior to that, I was teaching junior high school and high school. So I've come a long way, but I'm not at the finish line yet. And this evening, I just wanted to leave it to all of you to determine the direction of this conversation. So I welcome any questions. I welcome any comments. You're certainly welcome to disagree with me if you wish to do so. And that's basically it. You know, I'm happy to be here another time.
So I think we can start by opening it up to any questions you have. As I mentioned previously in class, if you're feeling, if you want to ask a question, but you don't want to be named, you can always go ahead and send a private chat message to me, and I'm happy to ask the question for you. If not, go ahead and ask on your own. And we're going to start there, and we can always move in other directions as needed. So I think we have one question that it looks like Willie Hay is asking everyone if you can talk about your work at the MIAC show.
Oh, yeah. The MIAC is the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture in Santa Fe. Letitia Chambers, who is the curator for this show, conceived of it a number of years ago, but it finally started to take form about 3 to 4 years ago. The exhibit is titled Clearly Indigenous, and it's focusing on the glass art movement in the Native American community, which probably started, I'm guessing, in the 70s. Dale Chihuly, the world famous glass artist, introduced glass art to Native Americans early on in the 70s, and it stayed in the closet for probably a couple of decades until it started to gain some recognition. And the recognition was pretty local at the onset, but because of its richness and its versatility as an art medium, more and more people started to gravitate towards glass. So I'm actually in the second generation of glass artists. In other words, I was doing other art forms prior to working in glass. Preston Singletary is a pretty well-known glass artist, along with Dan Friday. There are probably 24 different glass artists from a number of tribes who are included in this exhibit. It opened in May of this year at MIAC and is due to run until June of next year. So what it does is it showcases and acknowledges the value of glass art within the Native community. And I felt this was the right time to do it because, and this day is, you know, Indigenous Peoples Day. And it's just really, everything is really tying in very nicely together. I have several pieces in the exhibit, and in conjunction with this, I'll be engaging as an artist in residence at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. So I'm packing bags here about a week from now. I'll be there the last week of October all the way through the first week of December. So it's a 6-week period for me to grow some more, to incorporate maybe bronze casting into the glasswork. I'm really stoked because I've never worked with bronze before. And I'm just kind of rolling ideas in my head at this point as to what I would like to do with this opportunity.
All right. We have another question about identity. Ramson, how do you think your identity has contributed to your success as an artist? So talking about your identity.
Well, the word success means something different to different people. I'm still growing as an artist and as a person. It's really helped me on, I guess, trying to grow in a lot of different ways. I really don't see myself as anything special or anyone special. In our culture, we don't label ourselves, other people label us. So when people do inquire about, just how I reflect on myself, my identity of who I am, I just pretty much tell them, "Nu pipai nu," and that's in the Hopi language. Basically, it means I'm no one in particular. I'm no one special. I am who I am. And it just so happens that other people have recognized me as an artist, as an educator, as a consultant, as a father, as an uncle, as a brother. I mean, I'm a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I believe that the thing that really makes me who I am as an individual, not necessarily an artist or any of those other things, is just looking at myself and my reason for living, and that would be to share my life with other people.
Okay, we have another question about your artwork, which is, do you create your art for yourself or for an audience? What do you hope others will take away from your art?
My idea of what people will take away for themselves with my art is healing. And I believe in service work, doing things for other people. And one of the things that I happen to do as an artist is to grow love, because anything that a person creates has love connected to it, and healing. In Hopi culture, we look at the arts as healing the spirit. So traditionally speaking, in our culture, we don't necessarily put a high value on monetary gain or personal recognition for the creative work that we do. My purpose as an artist is to help to heal others as well as heal myself, because in our culture, we believe that every single person carries a little amount of pain throughout their lives. Some carry more pain than others, but through bringing into this world some beauty that a person can connect with, it's healing. So my purpose as an artist is to help to heal other people and to share a little bit of my spirit with them in terms of the artwork itself. It's good. It's meditative. I like to see people's eyes light up when they're, I guess, I don't know if they're enthralled. I mean, I'd like to think that they were enthralled with my art. But if they're like impressed with it, then that's good, you know. And if they connect with it, for me, they don't even have to buy the piece. If they just have a mini epiphany and say, "Oh, that is so beautiful," I did my job, because by lifting this person's spirit just a notch has helped to heal them in a little bit. So that's how I tend to look at artwork and what I see doing with it.
So we're probably going to feel that way when we look at a few of your glass pieces. We actually have a question that came up earlier about your glass pieces, and someone would like to see them. So we actually have a little slideshow of a few of your pieces to show. Emma, do you want to pull that up for us? Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Oh.
You didn't expect us to show that off, did you?
No, I didn't. Boy, I'm really impressed and enthralled by the artist who did all this wonderful work. The piece on the left depicts butterflies that we find on kiva murals that date back to the 1100s to about the 1600s. Butterflies were portrayed very, very simply, and they each represent different directions. So if you can see it, you can see that the heads of the butterflies, the little circles there, are of different colors. Yellow represents the north. The color yellow exists in this world, and it has a job. The job of the color yellow is to constantly remind us to approach life with a positive attitude. So for us, we believe that the color yellow came to us from the north. So the north is associated with that particular color. And then we move to the west, which is blue. And the color blue represents any kind of moisture. If you know about Hopi culture, we're known to be dry farmers. We're taught not to irrigate our fields because it's our ceremonies, our faith, and our prayers that's going to bring rain to us. So the color blue comes to us from the west and is representative of just moisture in general, any kind. Rain, rivers, creeks, oceans, what have you. And then the color red comes to us from the south, and the color red represents heat and warmth from the sun. And then if we go to the east, then you have the color white, which could be purity and snow. So these butterflies represent the beauty and life coming from all different directions, from the four cardinal directions. And they're all here flying over a stylized corn plant. And you would think that that corn plant in the middle would be green, but for us, we use the color black to represent the future. And if you look at the lower left hand, there's a vertical green stripe coming out of the foundation of this piece. And there's a young butterfly emerging out of that. that's the future generation. And then they're just coming into being from our mother, the earth. So the the parallel green bars coming up from the bottom represent the potential life that is not yet here, but will be in the future. And then the smoky black represents the prayers of our ancestors, of the different spirits that we acknowledge, of the people here that smoke tobacco to pray for the well-being of all life. And then in the center is a sunflower. So the bottom of this you see on traditional textiles on a Hopi wedding robe. You can't see it in that slide here, but the clear glass has striations in it and they're all unbroken patterns. So the challenge of this particular piece was to take probably, I'd say about 3 square feet of glass, as I recall, and cut them to those individual shapes without breaking any of the pieces. Because if I did that, I would break the continuity of the flow in the glass, which is the same thing that I did with this piece for the Archaeological Center, is when you do look at the glass, the clear glass on that particular piece, we call it Baroque glass, because not like in Baroque, not broke, but Baroque. It has striations in it. And the challenge of working with that glass is that you got to get it all done in one set. If one cracks, you just don't replace the one cracked piece. You have to replace the entire number of pieces that compose that area. So that was the challenge of this. The butterflies piece is part of the exhibit at the MIAC Museum in Santa Fe. And then the center one is a commission that I did for a private residence in Santa Fe. It's probably at least 20 years since I've done this. Everything is custom made on there, the frame and everything. And basically, if you start from the bottom on the left and the right of the side lights, this depicts life before we're born. And then as it ascends on each side, it's talking about the different phases of a person's life, from infancy to childhood to adolescence and eventually to full maturity and into old age. And then the transom at the top depicts everything from that life, what constitutes a full, enriching life for any person. It's full of beauty, it's full of love and compassion, it's full of being selfless. So for me personally, I'm really into service work, volunteering for different projects or different organizations. This is what helps me as an artist, is to give of myself to others. And then the piece on the right is called a Salakmana. This is one of our kachina figures. It represents a butterfly maiden. And that particular piece is in a private residence in Scottsdale, Arizona. And again, that piece is probably between 25 and 30 years in the making. So I love doing stained glass work. Once I found glass blowing, stained glass went on the back burner for about 2 decades. And so the piece that's going to the Archaeological Center is the revisiting of my stained glass work. So to me, it's like a rebirth. I've completed the cycle and now I'm starting another one. Now, these vases are some of the things that I do. At the upper left on my screen anyway, you see a kind of a striated vase that's irregularly shaped, has an orange interior. This is part of a series that I call the Swirling Stones series. And one of the things that I enjoy doing, because a lot of the work that I do is landscape inspired, is I like to travel around and take pictures of rock formations, close-ups of the patterns in the rocks, different types of rocks, metamorphic rocks, igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks. I mean, I really love landscape and geology. And I just go on these excursions without really planning them out, because, I think going into something with no plan is one of the best ways to get to know yourself and the world a little bit better. And so I just try to recreate that landscape that I encounter in different places in the Southwest. So that one is called Swirling Stones. The one on the lower left is modeled after a Siketki style piece of pottery that historically is associated with a variety of Pueblo groups and with Hopi. So that's a classic form for pottery. It goes back probably several hundred years in terms of the form itself and the shape. But again, if you look at this piece, it's very earth oriented. And then the teardrop vase in the center is just everything is centering around the earth. If you look at the bottom half of it, it's pretty much white with some brown patterning in there, and that's the snow. It represents the snow that's melting off of the brown rocks that we have here in the Southwest on our reservation. And if you go up just a little bit, you see a flower blossom coming out of there. So the flower blossom is really the top of the vase as we were working it. So we took the top of the vase that was fluted out with the petals, and we broke it off the top of the vase, and we reworked the lip of the vase, and then transferred the original top to the side, and so it becomes a flower. So it's not a separate piece. It's still coming from the original blown piece. And then the last one there again represents just the movement of the earth formations, because nothing is stationary. You look at a rock and you're thinking, well, this doesn't move. But if you look at it on a molecular level, it's going at light speed. It's just vibrating. It's in movement. If we were here for like 45 million years, we could probably see the earth shift in a number of ways, just geologically speaking. So the idea is to capture that feeling of everything is in flux, everything is in constant flux. And this speaks also to our humanness, because we all have periods of relaxation. I'm sure that all of you, and me included, have periods of chaos and stress on many different levels, and some of these periods for us in our lives are intense, others can be fairly just small stresses, like, oh man, my pen ran out of ink, and that's stress, but it's like on a real minuscule level. So if you look at that piece, the outer one is that chaos that is constantly rotating, just surrounding us in our lives. But if you look at the centerpiece, it's round, it's stationary. Joseph Campbell often talks about the center, the axis mundi. And so that is that center in all of us. It's stationary, it's calm, it's contained within the chaos. So although my life may be chaotic in a good variety of ways at different times of the day or the week or the month or the years, that's all external. As long as I stay focused to my inner self, stay true to my inner self, that will always be at rest. It'll be calm. It won't get sucked into that stress, you know. And everyone has this. We all have that place in us where we can just kind of leave this world and then just kind of find solitude in ourselves, that calm place. So that's what that particular piece is alluding to.
Thanks, Ramson. We have some questions about your work as a teacher, and one of them is obviously Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And the question follows with, do you consider yourself a teacher? And if so, what are your thoughts on teaching or apprenticeship in art?
Okay, well, do I consider myself a teacher?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Okay, so help me on this. I'm getting off track here. There's this chat thing going on my side.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm actually looking at all the chat questions, so you don't have to stress about it.
Okay.
So I'm just like, I'm going, and if you want to look at them, you can, but I'm just following the questions as they come up, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, because I took my glasses off, you know.
Yeah, don't worry about it. But I think the main question was about your teaching and whether you consider yourself a teacher of art. I think was kind of what the individual asking the question was getting at, whether art is something that you feel you can teach in apprenticeship, and if that's something you're currently doing.
Again, teacher is a funny word. I don't label myself as a teacher. The contract that I signed with the school board here on the reservation, it said teacher on my contract, but if anything, maybe I might consider myself a mentor. Because a lot of people ask me when I'm doing glass blowing demonstrations, did you teach yourself? Or where did you learn this? And I just, my general response to people is that, I don't think a person can teach themselves something they don't know. So rather than using the term self-taught, I prefer to use the term self-learned, because I learned a lot of the stuff through reading books, through talking to other glass blowers, watching new techniques being demonstrated on YouTube. So I try to utilize all these resources for my own growth. So whenever I teach a glass blowing class, the first thing that I share with my apprentices, because I don't consider them students, I consider them as equals. To me, the only difference is I have 20 years of experience and they have maybe 5 minutes. Other than that, we're all in the same boat. I like to look at my apprentices as equals, not as people who are below me. And one of the first things that I share with people who take classes is that, this class really isn't about learning how to blow glass. This class is all about overcoming fear. Because when you come into this fresh, fear abounds. There's fear of the heat, fear of getting burned, fear of failure, fear of miscommunication, fear of being misunderstood. I mean, and the list goes on and on. So my role as a mentor is to support my students and share the resources that I've learned myself with them, so that when their skill level, their confidence level begins to rise, the level of fear begins to come down. And so as the fear comes down, the skills and the self-confidence level go up. And at some point, they're going to reach equilibrium. And not everyone reaches that point at the same time. People take a little bit longer than others. But once you've reached that equilibrium, then that's when the fear is going to go down even more, and the skill and the confidence level is going to keep rising. So once I sense that a person has reached equilibrium, they're ready to work independently of me. So my role as a mentor is to try and share enough with my apprentices so that they're able to be independent of me rather than dependent upon me. And I carry that over to being a father. My kids, I have 5 children and they're all grown up. They didn't come here for me. They may have come through me, but they didn't come here for me. So recognizing that, I believe that my job as a father is to raise my children so that they are independent of me, not dependent upon me. So I kind of operate in 2 worlds here, you know, my life as an individual, as a father, and that of an artist, because in Hopi culture, both of them cross over. One is applicable in the other, and vice versa. So when I do work with apprentices, I really like to get to know them as people, first of all. And then they're picking up the skills and the confidence and overcoming their fears. It eventually starts to take hold and they grow from that experience.
I have some questions for the private chat about life on the reservation in today's 21st century. How would you describe life on the reservation at this point, specifically the Hopi communities, in your own words?
In my own words, well, this is my perspective. It's more challenging. It's more stressful. It's more uncertain in some areas. And it will be that if you don't have an adequate sense of self, if you don't feel that you have strong identity, then you're more susceptible to succumbing to some of the pressures that we're living with today. I can recall my own childhood on the reservation. You know, we didn't have video games at all. You know, we were still into rotary phones, although we didn't have a rotary phone in our home. No one had any kind of mass communication in their homes at that time. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have plumbing. We didn't have anything like that. No infrastructure. And so, we've come a long way. So life was more simple when I was growing up. It was less stressful because you didn't have to worry about social media and being, ghosted. We were friends with everybody. We played with our own self-made toys. We would carve tops out of cottonwood root and just get a stick and a shoelace or something and, spin that top all over the village. One of the things that we did, I remember as a little kid, was we just find a tire somewhere, a discarded tire, and roll it around the village. That was our idea of fun. Or riding donkeys. A lot has changed. It's more and more difficult, I find today, to have quality family time because it's really difficult to get to know your family members if everybody's on their iPhones at the dinner table. That's had a big impact on the reservation. So life today, it can be calm if you want it to be. You just have to be willing to live a simple life and utilize these tools, these resources, but not get ruled by them. It'd be a challenge just to leave your phone off for a day. How many of us can do that? And that's something that I just remind, my family of, try turning your phone off for one day and see how your life changes. So life is good. The way I look at life on the reservation today is we do have our problems out here. We do have just about every issue that any other community has. We have domestic violence, we have alcoholism, we have suicide, we have drugs out here, crime, but it's not all that. We have calm evenings, we have laughter, we have our cornfields. There's a lot to negate the negative stuff. So, to me, as long as I'm willing to live simply and share my life with other people, I may be surrounded by a lot of negativity in the world, but by just living that simple life, I don't have to contaminate myself with any of that.
We actually have a follow-up question about your thoughts on technology that you just shared, but this particular individual wants to know a little bit more about how that changed as a result of the COVID pandemic, or even life in general on the reservation changed because of the COVID pandemic, and wants to kind of follow up with some information about that, if you're willing to share.
Oh, yeah. Well, initially the first wave hit, we were impacted on the reservation. It was interesting to discuss this because back in 2020, when the first verified case was made known to the public, my oldest daughter, well, my family, we're all gathered together, and my oldest daughter commented that, well, it's out there, but maybe it'll stay contained on the outside world, and we'll continue to live in our bubble here on the reservation. And I told her, it'll get here yet, but not right now, but it's going to get here. And she was asking about why I felt that way, and it's because the older people, generations back, already foretold of these things. You could label it prophecy or whatever you want, but these older people already knew that these things were going to be coming. And so I let her know this is what was taught to me, passed down to me. So I've known this for many, many years. And now it's finally happening. So I said, you know, it'll get here yet. And it won't just be one time. It's going to be in waves because this is what the older people talked about. So sure enough, you know, here we are well into the pandemic and we're seeing these waves. And as you know, as long as we take precautions and look to our fellow human beings in trustful ways, we'll get through this. But it'll be at a price. This is what the older people would tell us. We're not going to get by anything in life unscathed. Everything is going to have its consequences. So I knew about that, and sure enough, you know, we had cases on the reservation, and the entire reservation went on lockdown. Every village was quarantined, and like anywhere else, you know, we had naysayers on the reservation. And so there was a little bit of tension and conflict in terms of what this pandemic was all about. But thankfully, most people out there took it very, very seriously. So what it did was it made us a little bit more reliant on communicating with each other through technology. So rather than go visit my brother in the village, I just call him up. And so that's the value of technology. It works when we need it. It works when it'll serve the entire community and the group. It doesn't work when you isolate because of the technology. Once you start isolating, that technology will run your life at some point. So this is what I've learned from the pandemic and just the role of technology on the reservation. It's good if you use it properly, just as anything else.
In terms of the Hopi language, can you tell us a little bit about the Hopi language and specific differences between, you know, Hopi and other languages out there that you've noticed?
Well, you know that there's hundreds of federally recognized tribes in this country. And just as many languages, because every group has their own language. Unfortunately, for a lot of these tribes, language loss is a real thing. And you know, I see English also is disintegrating just a little bit because I'm old school. I was taught to speak the English language in a particular way so that I had clarity and that I could effectively communicate. And one example is a lot of people use the word like. And I just really have a difficult time with that word just being used, you know, as jargon. That's not what I was taught in, you know, when I was learning English. I learned proper English, you know, and I tend to just gravitate toward that. I try to be as clear and as specific as I can in my communications with people. If I know them on a casual level, I'll use casual language. But as a professional, there's a proper place for using effective and clear language. When I was growing up, just about everybody spoke Hopi. From, I'd say, kindergarten, I was all Hopi. So Hopi is my first language. English is actually my second language. But seeing as how things were when I was growing up, and even way, way before that, I went to a school where we were not allowed to speak our own language. And so English was drilled into us. And that's part of cultural trauma. When you have events like this, it doesn't only affect an individual, it affects the entire group. In our case, the entire tribe. So over the years, the best guess I can look at right now is maybe the 50s. The Hopi language has been in slowly decline. And today's younger Hopi people, they either don't speak it at all. I believe with the last survey, 20% of the Hopi membership do speak Hopi. Now, the degree of fluency is an opinion, it's not a fact. I mean, who's to say who's fluent? Because I believe that no one can really be Hopi fluent anymore, because so much has changed over time. But I can still communicate, I can hold a conversation in our own language. I can read Hopi, I can write Hopi. And this is something that is being attempted to teach on the reservation, but 1 hour a day, several times a week at a grade school is not enough. If a person is going to learn a language, it can't be limited to the classroom. It has to be done at home as well. And it's just not happening. So 20% is the latest number that we have of people who do speak Hopi. I've always been a proponent of maintaining the language, but sometimes younger people, for whatever reason, are resistant to learning proper Hopi. And I don't know if I would make that same assumption with English speakers. Are there younger people out there who are resistant to learning what I was taught as proper English? So these are just questions that I think about every so often. I don't have any answers, but I just have these observations.
Okay, we have some more. We have a kind of a medley of different questions about your art, and we probably have time for a few more questions. So I'm going to move into some more questions about your artwork. Basically, I think one student wanted to ask about new art forms. They were really interested in the fact that glass blowing is considered to be a new Hopi art form in this case. And if you're hearing about any additional new types of art within your community or in other communities?
Yeah, glass is, well, Hopi people are not strangers to glass. If you look into archaeology, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people were using obsidian and making it into projectile points. So, of course, you could argue or debate the point between functional things or aesthetic things. Was it a work of art, or was it a projectile point, or could it be a little of both? I mean, I don't know if there's a a right or a wrong or definite black and white answer to that. It's just something that we discuss as people. But in that sense, Hopi people, as well as other indigenous groups, are not strangers to glass in that form. So obsidian does have a place in Hopi history. Glass art as we know it today was totally non-existent in Hopi culture until I had a chance meeting with glass art in upstate New York. I was up there doing some consulting work back in, I believe it was like the 80s or the 90s. And I had an opportunity to visit Corning Glassworks. And at that time, Steuben Glassworks was still in operation, both in Corning. That was the first time I was exposed to glass blowing as an art form. And basically that afternoon watching glass artists work and dance together just totally changed my life. Because like with stained glass, I concluded that, stained glass art is not traditionally, nor is it historically a part of our culture. Well, someone's got to plant the seed. And so with stained glass art, I bought a book on how to do it at a hobby shop, brought some scrap glass home, brought myself like a $2 cutting wheel at the time from a hardware store, and I just started going to it. I went to town. And over the years, I learned a lot. I grew with that. And eventually, it turned into what you saw a few minutes ago in those stained glass windows. So to me, that's growth. I've grown as an artist. I've grown as an individual. I've grown in many, many different ways just through that experience. But I planted a seed in the hopes that in the future sometime we would have a community of stained glass artists who happen to be members of the Hopi tribe. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to dictate its direction or claim to be the first and the only stained glass artist with our tribe. That's something that just hadn't occurred to me. I want to share this art form with other people so that they can gain some sense of self-confidence and artistic satisfaction from those experiences. And it's the same thing with blown glass. Blown glass as an art form is non-existent in Hopi culture up until I started doing it. So today, as far as I know, I'm still the only glass blowing artist from the Hopi tribe. I've apprenticed people and they've given it a go, but for whatever reason, they choose not to pursue that. So I do have one person, hopefully, that I sucked into the zone. That would be my grandson, Ian, who's upstairs in his bedroom, and even as we speak. He's picked up glass blowing. He's 17 years old, and he's in high school, but he's already got orders coming in for himself. So, I told him, you can either pursue this glass art form, you can go to college, you can go to trade school. I mean, you can do a number of different things and have a pretty good life. So he's already blowing chili peppers. And he's going to town with it. The other thing that I look at is I'm not going to be here forever. And once I, kick the bucket and, start pushing up daisies, I'd really hate for that equipment that I invested 20 years into just to sit around and get rusty. I'd rather have someone utilize all that stuff. So in a sense, I'm not I'm not growing this glass blowing business for myself. I'm growing it for my grandson so that he has a head start on all of this stuff. I may have gotten off track, but did I answer the question kind of?
I mean, it's okay that you got off track if you did. I wasn't, I think at this point, it was really interesting to hear about the generational connection between you and your other family members. It's just awesome. And thinking about grandparents, grandchildren, just it's central in the book that we're reading right now. So it's really interesting to hear that story play out in your own life. And anyway, so it's 9:03. For anyone who wants to stay after and ask a few more questions, you can. I don't want to disrespect my students' time, and I want to make sure I'm focused on letting them out on time. But if anyone wants to stay after, we can take a few more questions. Otherwise, if you have to leave, feel free to leave now and have a really nice night.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you who
Thank you.
leave, it's been my pleasure. I hope that I left you with something to think about.
Thank you.
So if anyone wants to stay after and ask a few questions, feel free to do that. I can hang out here for a little bit longer, and then we'll probably need to all take off at around 9:15 our time. But I think we still have a little time for any additional questions from anyone who would like to hang out and ask any questions. I'm just looking at whether we have any additional ones here for anyone who's still here. I think there were some questions about sociology and how that affected your understanding. Oh, Dakota, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So like, first off, like everything you said today was like amazing. It's like really, I've learned so much. So I just want to say thank you for that. Secondly, I was wondering, so you've mentioned like you've been an educator in like a lot of places and had like a lot of mentees, like apprentices. And so I was just wondering, like in so many demographics that you've like, I guess, communicated with, or like, I don't know, like had collaborations with. So is there like specific differences in how they would view you and your artwork, or how they would interpret it because of like different people's backgrounds and all of that? So yeah, it's pretty open-ended.
Well, okay, so yeah, I think artwork is best appreciated if you know the artist and their background, because I've come across a lot of people who initially look at my artwork at shows or at Indian art markets, wherever. And one of the first questions people would ask me is, glassblowing isn't an Indian art, is it? And I usually say, it is now. And then I have to regurgitate the history of glass art with Hopi and with myself, time and time again. But people's impressions of Native artists especially is really based in stereotype and a romantic image of Native Americans, not today, but in years past. So if you look at ledger drawings, I mean, from Plains people, those go back at least 100 years, as I know. And so people equate, I mean, people know about that stuff, but when you're talking about working with other mediums, glass is one of them, sculpture is another, using different mediums in sculpture, people initially don't get it because they've been locked into this stereotypical view of Native American art. And it's great being a sociologist in that sense, because it gives me an opportunity to pick a person's brain as to where the roots of their perspectives lie. because I see that not only in artwork, but in different facets of American life, where people have a view of something or another based on their own personal background, their own personal experiences, and what they were taught in their own families. And some of those views are difficult to break, or they're difficult to overcome in some cases. It's interesting just to interact with people based on that. When I taught sociology, I would tell my students, you know, the one basic thing that sociology tries to answer is what compels a person or a group of people to certain behaviors. That's what sociology does. It tries to answer that question. And just interacting with the thousands of people that I have, you know, over the last, 30 years, maybe 40 years, is quite amazing.
Does anyone else want to ask another question? I see some in the chat, but I'm hoping that I can motivate people to share their questions aloud if they're still here, or you can read it aloud. Quinn, do you want to read your question? Or do you prefer that I ask?
Sure. So just a quick question between the like perception, like your perception of the relationship between like the Hopi tribal government and the US government. I was just like thinking, like, do you think the tribal courts like of the Hopi community like deliver justice? Like, would you say to like the Hopi community, or would you say there was like significant work to be done in like the judicial system on like the Hopi reservation?
When we talk about that word justice, it means different things to different people. The Hopi traditional concept of justice is this, that a person is always guilty until proven innocent. That's the Hopi concept of justice. So you don't have a lot of wiggle room. The other idea is that ignorance of the law is an excuse, but only one time. And once you've had your one strike, you're already out. And from that point on, you're expected not to violate that because you already know what the rule or what the law is. So our sense of justice is very, very different from historically the American system of justice, which is just the opposite. And that does have an effect on how justice is played out, you know, especially between two cultures. Because the Hopi tribe is reliant on the federal government in so many areas, it's something that we've been channeled into over time. We talk about it in terms of acculturation. And prior to that, you know, getting Native Americans to become part of the dominant society was a lot more drastic. I mean, you know, we talk about genocide at the earliest time of American history. We talk about forced relocation from homelands. So when you have a concept of justice that is not, that really doesn't agree with what the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution tells us, how much faith do you put into that system? And that system has played for so long, especially with indigenous people. So again, that's part of cultural trauma. Yeah, you know, when do you trust a person when they've stabbed you in the back so many times? That's a hard question. And we try to accommodate our mindsets and our philosophies in terms of being Hopi people to that of the white American sense of justice. So, you know, we've played the game long enough so that we feel that we can survive. But in terms of justice in the true sense of it, in the philosophical definition of justice, we're not there yet. And it's great to have a president make a proclamation acknowledging the value and the contributions of Native Americans or indigenous peoples in this country. But it wasn't taken all the way because nothing was really said about eliminating Columbus Day. So it's, you know, and I understand that President Biden is trying to be as diplomatic as he possibly can, but sometimes diplomacy just doesn't work.
We have a few questions that are specific about your knowledge of other glass blowers. I think there's someone in the Zoom room who's asking about whether you've seen glass blowers from California, and would you consider looking at some of this glass blowing in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I'm aware that there are glass blowers all over the country and in California. Right offhand, though, I'm not familiar with any glass artist who is Native American. I know a lot of glass artists in general who live in California, and they're taking the art form into new directions. In terms of Native American artists, you see them mostly in the northwest coast area, from Washington State into Canada. Those are some of the center points of glass art, simply because Tacoma and Seattle are hubs for glass art in general. So naturally, you're going to have people from that area, indigenous people, centering themselves in those communities and you know, doing their work and showcasing their work in those areas. Here in the Southwest, it happens to be Santa Fe, because there are probably 4 glass blowers who are from different pueblos in New Mexico. And then there's myself from Hopi. So we all tend to gravitate to this place called Prairie Dog Glass in Santa Fe, where there are glass blowers from different ethnic backgrounds, but it seems like the Native American glass blowers tend to congregate there. That's our second home. And everyone else is spread around the country. And, you know, I really haven't heard of any central gathering points for other glass artists. I think a lot of those glass artists, the further east you go, the more independent they are. They don't tend to gather as a group like we do here in the Southwest, or the glass artists up in the Northwest coast.
All right, so it's 9:16 here on the East Coast. Out of respect for everyone's time and the evening hour, I'm going to let everyone go. But thank you so much, Ramson, once again, for speaking with us, sharing your background, your story, your culture, your art with us tonight. I know it's only 6 o'clock there. Was it at 6:15 in Arizona? But we hope that you have an awesome rest of your evening. And thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Anytime. Well, you know, I drove into Flagstaff because of the internet connection. It's a lot better here.
Yeah, I remember talking with you about that.
I'll probably go out and, I don't know, grab a pizza or something, and then.
Is it really just really spotty? Is it just spotty internet pretty much? Is that what the deal is?
It's not even spotty. It's like worse than spotty.
It just doesn't exist. Yeah, I know.
In theory, it exists, and according to T-Mobile,
T-Mobile, it exists, but it doesn't really exist. Yeah.
no, but not out there.
We have some issues here, even in Andover, because of the trees, where things just, if you're sitting and you all know this, like if you're on campus in this one place, your internet just doesn't work anymore. It's like completely out.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I was running around frantically a couple of hours ago because I was switching providers.
Yeah.
It
That worked out.
Yeah, it
It
worked
worked
out
out great.
just in the nick of time too.
Exactly. Well, hey, that's sometimes how it happens, right?
Yeah, man, I was sweating bullets.
Well, I
didn't
think
want to be late for
we kind of forgot what getting back onto Zoom would feel like, like just all of the tech, not the glitches, but just all the tech stuff. Because at least on campus here at Andover, we haven't really done that much on Zoom this year. So I had forgotten, like, oh, I need to update my Zoom. I need to, do this. I need to do that before I get online. And I completely like zoned out with it, right? And
Yeah.
I figured I did it. I will admittedly say I did it a little bit too late. It was
Yeah,
like
well, see,
7:30,
that's what I was talking
7:40.
about. Technology is great for creating stress to some degree.
It is. Yeah.
But it's necessary.
Especially now. Yeah. And it's so
Yeah.
awesome to be able to connect with people all around the world now in a way that we never could before. And I don't use social media. So this is a way for me to connect, much more often with people in other places. Just because I just haven't used social media for a long time. So
Yeah, so once I get back home, I need to start prepping for an artist in residence tour at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. I'll be there as the artist in residence working with glass, and I'm going to try to incorporate bronze casting into the glass work.
that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so my period there begins on the 27th of this month, and it'll run until December the 7th, I believe. So I'll be living in Santa Fe for 6 weeks.
Well,
Nice.
I have Olha and Amber, my last two students here in the Zoom room. I give them credit for staying after. That's when students are really engaged, when they decide they want to stay after and listen.
Yeah.
So extra kudos to the two of you. I know you've got so many other things going on with midterms this week. And everything else, all this other stuff. This is a crazy week here at Andover. A lot going on with a lot of different, we had Indigenous Peoples Day today and activities with that. And then Wednesday, they don't have classes, and there's other things happening with is it the PSAT, Olha? And is it SAT? Okay. Testing stuff that they have to do. So it's just, there's a lot going on for them.
Yeah. Well, I do commend all of you for sticking with it. I was there at one point in my life too, and it's not easy. Academics is academics. Doesn't care who you are or what your background is. It's just there for us to get better at. So I do commend all of you for doing what you're doing. Just don't give up, man. Just if they say if you can't see light at the end of the tunnel, all it means is you're in a curve, and you just got to feel your way around that curve, and then you'll see light again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These two are the best. So I'm like very honored and lucky to be teaching them this year. So.
Well, I really appreciate your willingness to hang in there and just stick on the Zoom meeting.
All right.
Ramson, thanks for being here again.
Thanks, Ramson, and thanks to everyone for coming. And thank you so much for spending your night and day with us. And have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much, Ramson, and Ryan also.
Thank all of you. I do thank all of you, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Ramson.
Have a good night, everyone.
Great to see you.
Okay, good night.